All right, the 6 o'clock hour is upon us. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday evening Parent Academy webinar session. Thank you for joining, and again, we are so excited to have you as audience listeners and participants. I am Dr. Dre Graham, the Director of Educational Equity and Outreach for Alachua County Public Schools, and I welcome you this evening. Tonight, we will receive some helpful information from our guest speaker, Mrs. Carla Hutchinson. Mrs. Hutchinson will share information on navigating the individual education plans for our ACPS students. Just before we get started, let's review a few housekeeping elements. Please keep your microphones on mute through the duration of the presentation. We will be monitoring your questions and will respond accordingly. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your webinar window, and please note that all Parent Academy webinars are closed captioned, recorded, and posted to our website for access at a later date for re-review and for any individuals who cannot tune in live tonight. Your questions will be answered at the conclusion of each session. If there is a specific need to have a personal conversation or contact, the Parent Academy email is parentacademy@gm.sbac.edu, and we will get those questions or your request for additional information forwarded to the correct ACPS or community team member. And now, I'd like to present our guest speaker for this evening, Mrs. Carla Hutchinson, the Supervisor of Pre-K ESE programs for Alachua County Public Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Graham, for that great introduction. I'm honored to be here with you all on tonight, and I will do my best to share what I can about the IEP process and how to navigate that as a parent. I have worked in education here for over 20 years as a teacher, a curriculum resource teacher, behavior resource teacher, assistant principal, in several of our elementary schools. But I've also had the honor of being a parent of 4 children within our county. And I've had children and relatives with IEPs that I have helped to maneuver. So I'm familiar from both sides. And so I'm hoping to be able to share a little of what I know and answer any questions that you may have. So let's go ahead and get started. So my child has an IEP, now what? Well, first, I think we need to have an understanding of what is an IEP. IEP is the acronym for Individualized Educational Plan, and an IEP is a legal document, but I want us to understand that it's more than just a legal document. It's a roadmap. It lays out what programs of special education instruction your child will be receiving, those supports that they will receive, the services that they will receive so that they can make progress and thrive through their educational journey. So it is a roadmap to your child's success with tools along the way to help them in being successful. So I do want to talk about the IEP process. And if you have a child that has an IEP, you've maneuvered through this process, and you may be going through the various stages of the process now. And at the end of our session, I will do my best to answer any questions you may have about that process. But one of the first steps is your student being identified as possibly needing additional educational services. And we call those meetings EPT, Educational Planning Team. You come together as a team. You as the parent, as the guardian, you are always a part of any team regarding your child, and you should always be included in those meetings. Now, how does your child get identified? Your child may be identified through you as the parent. You can go to your child's teacher and share the concerns that you have. It can occur also from your teacher identifying that there is a need and taking it before their team and working towards scheduling an EPT. But regardless of the method, you should always be in the mix of the communication and be aware of what's occurring and what's going on, and know yourself when there are some needs that are standing out. It could be academically, it could be behaviorally. The next step is during that EPT meeting, during that educational planning team meeting, you all as a team will discuss the areas of concern, what has been done. You'll review data related to your child and how they're doing, what led to the identified need of a concern. And then you'll also discuss interventions that will take place in the areas of identified need and how long those interventions will take place, the time frame, how those interventions will be monitored, who will be responsible for monitoring those interventions. And then also you'll have a timeline for coming back to look at the progress of those interventions. Is your child making progress? Is the need still there? Is there a need to readjust what's occurring, what we're doing? If your child is making progress, you may continue to move forward with what you're doing. If your child is not making progress, then there may be a need to readjust the interventions and maybe intensify the interventions and change what is occurring as an intervention. If those interventions, if it's still a need that is identified, then it would move forward with the need for further evaluation. And before any evaluation can take place, you do have to have the consent for evaluation. And so the team cannot move forward with an evaluation without consent from you as the guardian. So as I stated, nothing occurs without you being aware, without you being a part of that team. Once the consent has occurred, we've received the consent, then a formal evaluation, psychoeducational evaluation will take place if needed. After that has occurred, you'll come back, meeting once again as a team and determining the eligibility and determining also if that initial IEP, if it will be written. If the student is found eligible for the services, then together as a team, you all will write that IEP together. And then that final step, and it's just a note here, step 6, but it also states and reminds you that the formal evaluation can be driven by parent requests. So as a parent, as a guardian, you can request that formal evaluation for your child. So understanding the IEP, these are the various sections of the IEP. On the screen, it's just a sample of one of the components of the IEP. It doesn't have a full IEP on here, but we're going to go through a number of the different components that you see on your IEP. And so the first is your child's current performance. The IEP has to state how your child is currently doing in school. This is their present levels of academic educational performance. It comes from evaluation results that may take place in the classroom, from assignments, but that current performance has to be present on there. Another section is the annual goals. These are goals that your child can reasonably accomplish in a year. And then the goals are broken down into short-term objectives, and the goals can be academic. They can address social or behavioral needs. They can relate to physical needs or any other educational needs. They also have to be measurable. We have to be able to measure whether the student has achieved the goals. So all of the goals do have to be measurable. The next component section, special education and related services. The IEP must list the special education and related services to be provided to your child or on behalf of your child. This includes supplementary aids and services that your child needs. It can also include modifications to the program or supports for your child. Or it can even include professional development that will be provided to assist your child. The next component, participation with non-disabled peers. This is where on the IEP, we explain the extent to which your child will participate or not participate with their non-disabled peers in the regular class or in other school activities. We also identify their participation in state and district-wide assessments. This for us could include our FAST assessments, end of course exams. That's where this information would take place, whether or not it is appropriate for your child to participate in those assessments. And if it's determined that it's not appropriate, it has to state why it's not appropriate and how the child will be tested instead. What would be the alternative assessment for your child? Dates and places. Your IEP, it has to state when services will begin, how often they will be provided, where they will be provided, and how long they will last. And so that's important, knowing that information. Transition service needs. So beginning when your child is age 12, the IEP, it has to address the courses that your child needs to take to reach his or her post-school goals. And so you'll start having those conversations at age 12, just bringing that awareness. But it really is impactful when they are transitioning into high school, knowing what are the goals, what courses will your child need to take to reach those goals that are established after grade 12. And so a statement of transition services needs has to be included in your child's IEPs. Age of maturity. So you're at the age of 18, your child has rights, and those rights are transferred over to the student at the age of 18. And so that's what that age of maturity is. And then the measuring of progress. Well, we already discussed that you had to have measurable goals written into the IEP. So the measuring of progress is measuring how your child is progressing towards meeting those goals. And one important piece in that is that you have to be informed of that progress. And so generally what happens here in Alachua County is each 9 weeks when you receive that report card, you should also be getting that progress report for the IEP on how your child is progressing towards those goals that are written in the IEP. So your IEP is written. Now, what's the next step? What happens now that we have this IEP? And so, for one, the services that have been identified as a need are now provided. The IEP is carried out as it has been written with the team. The teachers, your service providers, they all have access to the IEP and they know their responsibilities. So this can include any accommodations, any modifications, and supports that must be provided to your child as they're written into the IEP. As we discussed a little while ago, that IEP progress, you are informed each quarter of your students' progress towards those annual IEP goals. If your child has an IEP and you don't know how they're progressing towards meeting those goals, then you need to have a conversation with someone at your child's school, your child's teacher, the teacher who is providing services, the therapist who's providing services, but you should be receiving that progress quarterly. The IEP review or amendment. So the IEP is reviewed by the IEP team annually, or more often if the parent or the school asks for a review. So yes, it's standard that we're going to meet annually to review the IEP, but you need to be aware and know that at any time, if you have any questions, you can request an IEP meeting, and you all can come together as an IEP team to review that IEP. So if, for instance, if your child is making progress and they have surpassed expectations of the goals on their IEP, you all may need to come back and rewrite and look at those goals and may have to make some adjustments to the goals. And it could be vice versa. If your child is not showing adequate progress, you can request that you all come back together and review the goals that are in place and make adjustments as needed. And so here you see some examples of reasons for an amendment. And as I stated, not making expected progress. There are additional supports or services that may be needed. Your child has some health concerns that have come up. And so there are additional services that your child now needs. And so yes, and a request for an amendment to the IEP can be made and you all come together. There's new information regarding your child. And so these are all reasons wherein that you can request a review of the IEP and that you all come together to review or amend that IEP. And then there's the reevaluation. So the team must consider the need for reevaluation at least every 3 years. But this consideration, it can be made more frequently as the team sees fit. So yes, we say reeval at least every 3 years, but once again, if the team determines that that needs to occur more frequently than at least every 3 years, then it can occur. And so one of the things that I think really is important is just knowing who are the members of the IEP team. Because if you have listened throughout, I have shared that you are an important part of that team. And I think that that's really important for you to know that you are a member of your child's IEP team. And the yellow boxes with the little diamonds, those are the team members that should be present at all of your IEP team meetings. You have the parents, you should be present, the guardian at every IEP team meeting. You should be made aware of it. You are a vital part of that team. A regular education teacher should be present at each IEP team meeting as well. And also the special education teacher or the provider of services for your child should be present. You have your school system representative. Sometimes you may have a counselor, you may have an administrator present in those meetings. Also, some individuals that could be present as well. If your student is of age and it's appropriate, your child, the student may be present as well. Why? Because you are talking about them, you're talking about services that they will be receiving. And if they are of age, they need to hear what those goals are that they're working towards. And they need to be aware of those accommodations, those services that they should be providing, because they're the ones that are sitting in the class. And so they have to learn also how to advocate for themselves if they aren't receiving something that they know is in their IEP. So it's important that you have them as part of that conversation and that they are an active member of that IEP team meeting. Also, It may be a need for whoever, for a person who can interpret the evaluation results. Oftentimes, that's our psychologist. You may have a staffing specialist that may be present from our school ESE department. Others with knowledge or special expertise about your child. And then if your child is getting ready at the age to transition out of our school system, there may be someone with the Transition Services Agency representative to help them with those post-secondary transition. And then also, please remember that you can invite anyone you choose to invite to attend your IEP team meeting, meetings with you. So anyone you want to be present, you can invite them to your IEP meetings. And so I think one of the most important pieces as it relates to having a child with disabilities going through this process of an IEP is knowing and understanding that you're your child's advocate. You're the first advocate. You speak up on their behalf. You're there to support and make sure they have what they need. And one of the things that is in place as it relates to your child's rights being met is the procedural safeguards. And so you should receive those procedural safeguards at every IEP meeting. And it's a notice containing a full explanation of the procedural safeguards available under IDEA. And it just lets you know that you have the right to review your child's educational records and that those records remain confidential unless you give written consent to release them. That your child's IEP will be reviewed at least once a year, but you have the right to request an IEP meeting at any time. It lets you know that that if you have any concerns or issues that cannot be resolved within the IEP process at the school level, there is a formal process for making sure and ensuring that those concerns or issues are addressed. And so that's that procedural safeguards. And you do receive them, you should be receiving them at every IEP meeting, made aware of those procedural safeguards and receive that copy. When it comes to advocating for your child, it's so very important that you are proactive. Stay on top of it. Monitor your child's progress. If you aren't receiving those quarterly progress reports, inquire. Find out how your child is progressing towards meeting their goals within their IEP. Communicate with your child's teacher, communicate with the IEP team. If your child is receiving speech services, language services, occupational therapy, touch bases with those individuals and inquire and communicate with them on your child's progress. If there are things that they're learning at school, find out how you can continue that learning at home. And more than anything, ask questions. No question is a bad question. Ask questions. It's a challenge when you have a child with a disability and you may not know all of the answers. So if you have a question, ask someone. Never be afraid to ask. Never be afraid to advocate for what's best for your child. And get on the same page. Get on the same page. And when I talk about getting on the same page, I mean, we as a school system, as your child's teacher, the school, home, everyone has to be working together for the best interests of your child. So work towards building those positive relationships with those individuals who are with your child those 6 hours of the day when you're not with them. Build those positive relationships. Develop a home to school communication plan. How are you all going to communicate with one another? What is going to be that method of communication that you're going to utilize? Some parents, they don't want to receive 1,000 emails. Some parents, would like to just be notified at the end of the week on how their child is doing. So meet with your child's teacher, meet with the individuals who are working with your child, and determine what's going to be the best home to school communication plan for you. That's really important. And what's going to be the best method of communication? Is it going to be via email, or do you need to have a phone call or a text? What is going to be that best method of communication that's going to work with you? And then also listen to your child's teacher and those individuals that are working with your child. How do they want to receive communication from you? If you do have a concern, if you do have something that you would like to share with them, how do they want to receive that information? When's the best time for you to reach out to them or to notify them or to communicate with them? And so communicate, talk to one another, build those relationships so that you can openly talk to one another. And last but not least, be positive and be patient. Be positive and be patient. It's hard work. It's hard work on both sides, and it takes us working together. And so everyone has to be positive, and we have to be patient with one another, because I believe that our goal is all the same. We want what's best for your child. We want your child to be successful. And I know as parents, that's what you desire as well. That is all I have at this time for you all. And so if there are any questions, Mr. Graham, Dr. Graham, I have no problem answering any questions at this time.
Yes, ma'am. We are here. We don't have currently any questions in our Q&A. Oh, there we go. There I am. But just want to remind everyone that if you do have questions, please put them into the Q&A and we will get them answered. We'll give you a few more moments to do so. Just want to thank Ms. Hutchinson again, just for all of that incredible information that you're sharing. So thankful to be able to access and to really discuss this tool that can be used for the benefit of all of our students. We have a question that came in. How does grade progression and retention work under an IEP?
And so one of the things with an IEP as it relates to grade progression, retention, it's individualized. It depends on what is occurring with your child academically, what progress they are making as it relates to their IEP and their goals. And so that's a question that is more specific to the individual child. A lot of times you don't have retention of students with disabilities too often, depending on the disability and what's occurring, but that's more of a specific individualized question. And those are the types of questions that you address and talk about during those IEP meetings. And those conversations shouldn't be just occurring at the end of the year. Those are conversations that you begin having, after that first 9 weeks. You start having those types of conversations and talking to everyone coming together, everyone that's working with your child, you all coming together and having those types of conversations. So that's not a conversation that happens at the end of the year. That's something that you all should be discussing throughout the year. And that's a question that is child specific.
Our next question that we have, how does a 504 plan differ from an IEP?
So an IEP, I'm trying to think of how I can answer. So your IEP is your individualized educational plan. It has been determined that your child has a disability wherein we're going to meet that need. Sometimes with our 504s, we have 504s wherein a child is provided accommodations. So we've had children with 504s because they have a temporary disability that has occurred that limits them being able to perform academically. And so they need some accommodations to occur in order for them to meet those educational needs. And so a 504 may be written to be able to provide those accommodations. A 504 can also be written if your child may not have those a significant disability, but there are some needs for accommodations as it relates to your child's educational needs. And so a 504 can address that as well in that manner in providing those accommodations and needs for your child.
Thank you for that thorough answer, Ms. Hutchinson. We'll wait a couple more moments to see if we have any other questions that come through. We are not strangers to wait time in the classroom, so this we'll give you that processing time. But once again, just want to say thank you all for joining us tonight. We try and make sure that we're providing you applicable information that is relevant, that you can use in order to be able to provide our students with the best opportunity to succeed. Our next question: what are the benefits of a child taking the alternative state testing in terms of what it tells the teacher about their progress versus the standard FAST assessment?
So with the alternative assessments, there are a couple of factors that go into place in determining eligibility for a student to be able to take an alternative assessment. And so usually if a student is taking an alternative assessment, there have been some evaluations that have determined that the state standardized assessment is not an appropriate assessment for that student. And so the alternative assessment, it has various items that it measures that are more related. That's if a student is on access on an access curriculum, modified curriculum, wherein they are not receiving that same curriculum as our students that are being assessed with the FAST are in the course exams. They have a modified curriculum, so the alternative assessment is assessing as it relates to that modified curriculum that they're receiving throughout the school year.
And we did have one more question as of right now that came through. Does 504 extend beyond high school like an IEP?
So a 504 can extend beyond high school like an IEP. You would have to, and this is just me speaking from just experience with a nephew with a full scholarship to a school, and he had a 504, and he was able to receive those accommodations in college. It's important that if you have a child with a 504 that is or an IEP, either one, that you make sure that you reach out to that department at the student services department at that university college and make them aware, and you submit the appropriate documentation to them so that those accommodations, modifications that they need, that they occur at that level. It's really important at that level that your child is able and knows how to advocate for themselves and stay on top of it. But a 504 plan, it removes those barriers and changes the environment to make a classroom accommodating for your child. And so, yes, they can receive those services. They can receive those accommodations at the level past, at the post-secondary level.
All right. We have another comment. It's not a question, but Mandy Reed wanted to thank you for the great information, Mrs. Hutchinson. So I wanted to make sure to share that.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. I'm no expert, but I've been doing it for a while and I've learned a little bit along the way, and I'm still learning because there's so much to learn with IEPs and working with students with disabilities. But I think the most important thing is that we take the time to gain the knowledge and we build our capacity as it relates to it. And I think just speaking from the perspective of a parent, just knowing that it's okay to advocate for our children and knowing that it's okay to ask questions if we have them. And then if the individual, the person doesn't have the answers, being patient and giving them time to get the answers for you so that they can best assist you and your child.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We had another question that came in. What should you do if your child is not getting the accommodations that they should be getting?
So if your child is not getting those accommodations that they should be getting, for one, if they have an IEP, they have a 504, and it's, it has been stated what those accommodations and things are, then yes, they should be getting them. If they're not, the first thing I would do, because I think it's important that you follow the proper protocol. So of course, first, talk with those service providers who are directly working with your child. Schedule a meeting with your child's teacher. Schedule a meeting with the therapist working with your child or whoever it may be. Schedule those meetings first and have those conversations. If you still feel that it's not being resolved, then you take that next step going to the school administration within the building. Also, you could also request an IEP meeting and let them know that you would like to have an IEP meeting to discuss that your child is not, to discuss the accommodations that for your child, that you have some concerns. So you can request that IEP meeting as well. And so then if you still are having some questions and things, we do have an ESE department. We have a supervisor that's responsible and working with our elementary schools. We have an ESE supervisor that works with our secondary schools. So you can call our office and they can connect you leave a message for that appropriate supervisor to reach out to you and see if they can assist you in resolving whatever it may be, whether it's them coming to an IEP meeting, whether it's them going out to the school and speaking or going out and observing and identifying what's occurring. But those are the steps that you can take. Some of the steps, the initial steps.
All right. And we haven't had another one come back in yet. So I think with that, if we've gotten no more questions, I'd like to take a moment one more time to thank Mrs. Hutchinson so much for being here with the Parent Academy webinar series tonight. And thank you everyone for joining tonight's Zoom. We appreciate your participation each week, that you are available to connect with us for more informative presentations and discussions. I mean, double check. We've got some last ones. There we do have one more question,
Awesome.
but all it says is, I have a question. So
ask your question, ask away.
Yeah. Oh, they are typing it out. So they've asked for a moment, a moment more.
I have patience.
Yes. We are still very thankful that you all are here.
Yes.
And that you have come and to participate. It is great to go ahead and spread this word that we have this resource available every Thursday. It's always at 6 o'clock. We rotate the topics on week 1 for every other month. We've got, just as we do today, our ESE department will provide some information for how we can become the best advocates for our students. On the second week of the month, we have communication and student success services. Our third week of the month is generated towards college and career readiness, but that is not solely for our secondary students. We want to make sure we're always thinking about what happens beyond the K-12 system for all of our students so that we can help them set their plans for success so that they all have that equitable educational experience tailored to their specific needs. And then our final week of the month is geared around mental health, and those opportunities to glean some additional information are provided by parentguidance.org. So a partnership that we have there and that resource that they share with us, they'll actually be with us next week as well. And we'll get into that in just one moment after we answer this question. We've got a question that says, should we be letting all the teachers know that our child has an IEP, or will the school do that? My child is in middle school and has 6 different teachers.
Okay, so the school, administration, they should have provided that information to all of your child's teachers, and those teachers should have access to that IEP as well. And so they should be able to access the IEP. They should know what those accommodations are. Now, it does not hurt for you as the parent to inquire with them and make sure that they know what those goals are, what your child's needs are. I think that's really important, because if you think about it, how many kids that they have and how many students with disabilities, with IEPs that they may have in their class. And so it doesn't hurt for you to have that meeting and talk about, meet with them and talk specifically about your child's needs and how your child learns best and what those accommodations and goals are. Touch base with them. I think that's really important. It helps foster that relationship. It helps them know that you are advocating and active in, with your child. And so I think that's important as well. So yes, they have access to that information, but it never hurts for you to meet with the parent and let them know who you are, who your child is, and what you feel works best for your child, and have your child present too. So that never hurts. That never hurts.
And we do have one more question. This parent is in the process of a disability educational plan. They were given info in regards to their rights as a parent and etc. However, the jargon is so much to digest, and they have been advocating for such a long time now and don't want to miss any important information. Are there any tips on having the information be more digestible?
So in simple terms, the summary of the procedural safeguards is knowing that you are a valuable member of the IEP team, that you have the right to review your child's educational records, and that they are confidential unless you release them, that your child's IEP will be reviewed at least once a year, but at any time you can request an IEP meeting. That's important to know. That if it also states in there that the IEP is a legal document and your child remains eligible for education, special education services if you move. So even if you move and you move to another county, your child is still eligible for those services. And you should present your child's IEP immediately upon enrollment in a new school district. If you have concerns or issues that can't be resolved at the school level, there is a formal process in which you can move forward with. And so that's kind of like the highlights of that procedural safeguards. Those are kind of the highlights, the biggest pieces within that, within all of the jargon that you said is in there. Yes, these are the most, I think these are the pieces that are the most important within that procedural safeguards for you as a parent.
So Mrs. Hutchinson, speaking of those safeguards that you just mentioned, we had a question come in that said, what should you do if a teacher isn't following the IEP?
So if the teacher isn't following the IEP, I think one thing is you can schedule an IEP meeting and have everyone on the IEP team present and discuss it. Because then you have everything within the notes, should be written into the notes of that IEP. You can go and schedule a meeting with the teacher and request that a school administrator be present as well. And if need be, you can reach out to our office and speak with an ESE supervisor who is assigned to that level. So if it's elementary, we have Dr. Brad. If it's elementary, we have Dr. Brasfield here, that is a supervisor of our ESE for our elementary schools. And if it's secondary, middle, and high school, we have Miss Coy Owens, who is an ESE supervisor. And so both of them have years of experience working with students and families with disabilities, and they can assist you as well if you feel you need assistance past the school level.
Mrs. Hutchinson, would you like to share some contact information? We have a request for ways to keep in contact with our ESE department.
So our ESE department is located at Fernside Family Services next to Rawlings Elementary School. Let me put the phone number. And that is our phone number. And you call the front desk. And if you say I need to speak with an ESE supervisor for a middle school, they'll guide you to the appropriate supervisor. If you say I need to speak to an ESE supervisor for elementary school, they'll guide and direct you to the appropriate person. I can tell you that as supervisors, some of us, we're not always in our offices, but you can leave a message. You can leave a message. You can leave a message with whoever answers the phone, and they'll make sure we get the information as well. Or you can even ask them for the individual's email and send an email as well.
All right, fantastic. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, just want to take another opportunity to thank Mrs. Hutchinson so much for being here and for that thorough information for our parents. And thank you all again for joining us on tonight's Zoom. Once again, I'm Dr. Dre Graham, the Director of Educational Equity for Alachua County Public Schools. Next Thursday, November 10th, we'll be joined by parentguidance.org, who will provide information on how to address bullying within our schools. Have a great night, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye. Thank you for having me.